Welcome in our Thursday night live showdown edition of the No House Advantage Strategy Show. Myself, Greg Ehrenberg, in the house with you for the next 25 minutes. And we're going to get you as fully prepared as possible to win some money. Tyler is in the house. We see you already popping in the chat. You know what to do. Hit that thumbs up button, like away, smash away, and also make sure you're subscribed to the channel, as we have a lot of cool things to tell you about, including, of course, our promo code, which you can use, Awesemo, and we'll match up to $25 for your first deposit on No House Advantage. You want to keep that promo code handy, as Greg has a ton of information to hit you with over the next 25 minutes or so. What's happening, my friend? And I see you're all settled in, new house, new life. Everything's good for you, right?
Although there are some guys working upstairs right now. So there's a bat in my attic. And the attic is also kind of like, it's like a cool like lounge / hangout type room. And there's apparently a little crease in the shingles that Bat has managed to shimmy into. And he comes out at night, he eats he eats some bugs, he shits on the floor, then he goes back in and sleeps during the day. So we've got somebody up there right now. I can hear him. He's very loud. He's climbing around. He's trying to put some netting in the wall so that the bat can't get through. Then some other guy has to come out and get the bat out and release them, because the bats are protected species in New Jersey. It's a whole big to do. But anyway, the guy's very high. The guy's very high up there, and there's a non-zero chance that we're going to see somebody fall and just his legs come through my ceiling while we're in the middle of this.
This sounds like a Geico commercial, right? Where it's like, we love the new home, except we have bats. And then it's just people upstairs like smashing stuff away, like Jose Canseco with a bat or something in the attic. Who do you even call to remove a bat?
So bat removal. So my brother was in charge of this, and like the first guy we called to do, we get a quote. It's like $2,400 to get a bat out of the attic. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. So then we're like, we're going to do it ourselves. And then look, and the ceiling is ridiculously high up there. It's like, no, I'm not doing this. So there's just somebody there who's like hanging from the rafters right now, trying to put it in. It's a big process.
We'll keep an eye on it. It will be right around where you see on the screen now, if you're watching our show, our promo code where it says Awesemo, and you can match your deposit up to $25. That's where we'll keep an eye to see if any feet come in from Greg's shoulder left above it. All right, my friend, let's dive into it. We see Austin Ward already in the house pounding the under for Saquon Barkley. So we'll match everything we have on No House Advantage with our tools that we can use on site at awesemo.com. And we should probably look at Saquon Barkley pretty heavy in this game because of the injury that he's still been dealing with, as well as just not having a great offensive line and really offense around him. So I jumped in on receiving yards, but I imagine rushing yards is probably a good place to begin.
But so there's something I also have to point out about how it works over on No House Advantage. If a player does not play, it doesn't mean you win the prop if you take the under. That's counted as a loss. So you don't want to play him, but he's not playing. My gut feeling is that Saquon's not going to play tomorrow. He was added to the injury report as questionable today. He was limited in practice. Apparently his knee isn't feeling 100%. He didn't play a massive role in week one. So certainly if he plays, I think there's reason to shade towards the under, but I would just caution that I'm not totally positive he is going to play in this spot. And if that ultimately ends up being the case, you can't have him in your lineups, even though obviously if it accumulates no stats, that would be the under in terms of, just what the number is, except you can't roster players who don't play. It's just counted as a zero.
Yeah. So looking at, even if there's hypothetical comes out where he's playing, I can't imagine that there would be anything at all, including receiving yards right through the obvious, which would be rushing yards, that would appeal to you as an overplay. It would seem like, as we roster depending on from 7 all the way up through 1 on No House Advantage. I mean, this is as strong of a conviction bet that you could make if he does happen to play. You're right. If he's out, then stay the hell away from him. But even if he's there, I can't see how a banged up Barkley playing would have this ridiculous game both in the air and on the ground.
Yeah, well, the thing also is that we have to consider this. His props are very, very low on No House Advantage. He has an over-under of 60.5 rushing yards, 25.5 receiving yards. So these are not substantially high numbers, and that is definitely something that makes me look at, even if Barkley was to play and be somewhat, it depends how limited he is, but would you really be that confident that he goes under 60.5 rushing yards if he plays? I think that's still, a somewhat fair line. The one I would be looking at is the 25.5 receiving yards we have currently in our projections for Barkley. We have him projected for 21.7 receiving yards, 2.48 catches. So the two that would really stand out to me with Barkley would be under 25.5 receiving yards, but actually more so under 3.5 receptions. The odds of him getting to 4 receptions, it's fairly low in this spot, especially if the Giants are going to be limiting his snaps a little bit. Also, this game should be competitive, so it's not like a spot that I think the Giants would be playing from behind a massive amount, where they'd have to be throwing the ball. So if we do get Barkley in, which is still a little bit of a caveat, my favorite play here would be Barkley under 3.5 receptions. And also, in case you guys weren't aware, with the way it works on No House Advantage, you can't play multiple props with the same player. So we just have to pick out one that we like the most. And to me, that would be under 3.5 receptions. But I'll ask you, Eitan, are you confident that Barkley ends up playing tomorrow?
No. And I, especially after hearing you and laying this out here with the short week, knowing that the Giants need him more so for the long haul and the bigger picture of not forcing him out there. Look, backup quarterback aside, you don't go into it as far as thinking you're going to be behind, but the reality is that the Giants are more likely to be playing from behind, even with Taylor Heinicke out there. So I think that if there is any shred of a doubt that he's not, 85% plus ready to go, then you err on the side of caution. I mean, look, this team is not geared to win anything this year. So it would make sense. He was already limited. We know that he was limited Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, still remains questionable. I mean, look, the fact that he was limited on a Wednesday and still remains questionable on a short week, I think you're right. Actually, I would probably bank on it that he doesn't play. And that opens up other things too, where we can talk about other guys around him. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm with you. My gut would say no.
Yeah, so that's where I'm leaning to. I think he's probably not going to play. And that's the big thing, too, is he missed basically all of last year. He only played, a very limited amount at the start of the season. Tears his ACL, has the injury. Even in preseason, when we were hearing reports about Barkley, even then it was assumed that he wasn't going to play the first 2 weeks of the season. It was somewhat of a surprise that he ended up playing in week 1. Now it's the short week. So, yeah, to me, I think that the odds of Barkley playing here is probably in the neighborhood of like 25%.
So what does this mean now for a team? And let's just assume for a second here that Saquon is not playing. And we know that Daniel Jones is going to have even more pressure on him, both to throw the football and while throwing the football from that front from Washington. You take out, even though it wasn't really working, you take out the one key relief that you have on the ground with Saquon. But other guys are banged up, or other guys are dealing with just not being 100%. Either physically or with chemistry, as we heard with Golladay. So, I'll ask you, as far as Golladay is concerned, I don't necessarily think anybody, especially him, would benefit from the absence of Barkley. It just would seem like it would be as difficult, if not more, to move the football down the field. I see him at 59.5, where I locked in on the triple up $600 play action on No House Advantage. And I went under receiving yards, not because he can't hit that normally, but just due to circumstance, Greg. I would fade a lot of Golladay.
Yeah, and once again, in our projections is they're going to agree with you here. The over on No House Advantage is over under for receptions is 4.5, is over under for receiving yards is 59.5. We saw Kenny Golladay last week. He got involved, but not until garbage time. He was basically non-existent in the first half of that game. Our projections for this game, we have him for 3.5 catches, 53.3 yards. If I had to pick one of these sides, I would lean a little bit more towards the under receptions, kind of like I was feeling with Saquon Barkley. It's just like you said, there's some chemistry issues where, number one, we haven't seen him play with Daniel Jones and the Giants that much, because don't forget, not only is he new to the team, but he had a hamstring injury in the preseason and training camp and barely got any reps there. So at least in week 1, the go-to guy for Daniel Jones when the game is competitive was Sterling Shepard. I don't know that's going to be the case all year, and that was certainly a small sample size. But I think it should be considered at least a little bit that there's a little more familiarity with Sterling Shepard and with Darius Slayton, that Kenny Golladay is still very new to the team, the most talented receiver on the roster overall. But still, given that we didn't see him play a massive role in the game until garbage time last week, it's hard to feel confident that he catches 5+ passes.
Chat's interested. I see Austin Ward following up with Slayton, and I'll throw it back as far as the two that we have with him. And I see a theme, by the way, with you with receptions over receiving yards. So we'll see if this stays up with that. And again, all we ask on this No House Advantage Thursday night showdown program is you just return the favor, hit that thumbs up button, make sure you're subscribed here to the Awesemo DFS, Awesemo Odds, and Awesemo Fantasy Football channels. Austin Ward about Slayton. We have it at 40.5 receiving yards, 2.5 receptions. I'm concerned, like Slayton has that big play capability where I could see a 2 reception, 55 receiving yard type day where I would fall in line more so with your kind of theory here so far, which we've been following, which is receptions and going under that, as opposed to taking any type of risk with Slayton, who could catch 2 balls and put you over that 40.5.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, is his reception prop is so low at 2.5.
It's ridiculously low, Greg Ehrenberg. 2.5.
And he got targeted 7 times last week, so he was still, pretty involved in the offense. Both those lines, I think, are probably about fair. Slayton's not one of my favorite players to go look at and check on props. We have him projected for 2.2 catches and 32.5 receiving yards, so that would shade a little bit towards the under for receiving, but still, it's. I think there's a little bit of familiarity with Daniel Jones and Darius Slayton that he doesn't have with Kenny Golladay, and just given that we saw him targeted 7 times in week 1, I don't really feel inclined to go under that 40.5 receiving yards, even if our projections shade towards the under a little bit.
What about the receptions themselves, though?
Same thing. I mean, we have him for 2.2, and his number here is 2.5, so it's not like it's that much of a difference. There's some other players that I think present better value. We've talked about, potential if Saquon Barkley ends up playing or is limited. We talked about Kenny Golladay and his high receptions prop. So we don't have to target every single player in their props here. And to me, the Darius Slayton ones are just fairly efficient.
How do we not target these both of these quarterbacks when it comes to turning the football over? I mean, Daniel Jones is a walking, breathing turnover. He's the human equivalent of a turnover. And the Giants defense is good enough to put some pressure on a quarterback, especially, and he's not the typical backup per se, because you go into the season knowing that you're probably going to have to give this kid some time. But it just seems like with both defenses, there'd be a pretty good recipe for both quarterbacks to turn it over in the air at least once. And that's where we have for both Daniel Jones and Heinicke, as far as turnovers, that half interception. You want to take a crack at either, if not both?
The Daniel Jones one's pretty appealing. Number one, that Washington has a very good defense. And I wish that we were able to get a fumble or interception here for Daniel Jones, because Daniel Jones to fumble or throw an interception, that's like a near lock. You just get a little concerned that, is he going to fumble the ball before he could throw an interception at some point? But 0.5 interceptions, we haven't projected well over that. We haven't projected for over 1 full interception. So the number's a little off to me. I think it should be 1 interception, not 1.5 for him, although it should probably be 1.5 turnovers in general, like 1.5 interceptions plus fumbles. That would give me something to think about. But 0.5, I think, is a pretty inefficient number. I like the over there quite a bit. Daniel Jones, who's on pace to set all kinds of records for turnovers in his career in the early going.
Yeah, and I think while the other quarterback is not as bad from a resume standpoint of turning it over, it's just the probability. And I know that we have our own on Awesemo, as Greg has been mentioning, where you should be following along our projections that will marry and match what's going on with No House Advantage and their props. But I would think both quarterbacks are pretty strong plays to just looking at one. Again, we're at a half for the pick for Heinicke as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how aggressive they're going to be with them. I think we could see J.D. McKissic get a little more playing time this week. I think they could prioritize getting the ball to Antonio Gibson. So I don't know that they're going to have Heinicke really just launching the ball downfield, taking a lot of chances. Also, the Giants defense last week looked fairly awful against the Denver Broncos, and the Giants had a really good defense last year. So I think that could be a situation where they bounce back. But the way we saw Denver move the ball against New York fairly easily was with a lot of short passes, and Teddy Bridgewater didn't really take any kind of real significant risks in that game and was still able to fairly consistently pick up, 7, 8, 9 yards per pass attempt. And I think that Washington might look at that game plan and say, like, hey, we don't want to take any real risks with Taylor Heinicke, kind of like how Denver didn't want to take any real big risks with Teddy Bridgewater, and they're still move the ball pretty effectively against New York. So if I'm looking at these two quarterbacks, I take the over on Daniel Jones for his interceptions. Heinicke, that would be more of a stay away from me.
What about the over 240.5 passing yards for Heineke, in the sense of that you're right, and we'll push that theory as a correct one, which they're not throwing the football 15 times down the field, 40 plus yards to Terry McLaurin, but they're moving the ball. They're taking advantage of a Giants defense that's open in the middle with Logan Thomas at the tight end spot. You know McLaurin's going to get involved as is. You mentioned McKissick. So getting to 250, let's say, I think is realistic to where you don't need to ask that quarterback to throw the ball downfield consistently.
So here's how I'd rather attack Heineke, though. I'd rather go to him for under 1.5 touchdown passes.
Okay.
I don't think that there's going to be, it's all in the same logic of some of the stuff we're talking about. I don't think there's a real need to open up the game plan, the playbook, and really try to get risky with Heineke. I don't think he's going to be taking chances downfield. If they get in the red zone, I think they're going to be more apt to run the ball than they are to pass. By the way, Heineke's also capable of running the ball himself. And with that in mind, I think that under 1.5 touchdowns quite a bit more likely than the over here, and that's the one that I feel best about with Heineke. The passing yards, if I had to pick a side, it would be the over. The interceptions, if I had to pick a number, it would be the over. But since there's one in passing touchdowns, that I actually feel more confident in those, and we can only pick one with him. If we're building a lineup, I go under 1.5 passing touchdowns.
All right. So as Greg mentioned on the chat, I'll reiterate it as well. If you have one out there that you really like, that you want to test and see if it stands the test of time with Greg, or if you want advice on something you've seen, maybe you saw the mouse click over on another prop with Tyler and you're thinking, wait a second, what about that one? Hit us up in the chat, leave us a like, hit that thumbs up button, and please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. So let's kind of shift a little bit more to Washington, as we covered the quarterbacks. And I'm interested to see how your game script matches up with taking advantage of a couple of props, right? We've brought up J.D. McKissick as far as being available in the passing game. Also, Antonio Gibson doesn't look like his shoulder is going to be a big enough issue to limit, like truly limit him. And then, we have a pretty big, impactful wide receiver in McLaurin and one of the better pass catching tight ends in Logan Thomas. So is there a game script that you like where you can attack one of those first as far as a prop?
Yeah, so one thing that's kind of interesting about J.D. McKissick is that we do not have any receiving yard prop for him over on Knox Advantage. They do have 19.5 rushing yards, and I just think he was hardly used at all last week. He didn't get targeted in the passing game. He only had one carry for 8 yards. He was not a big part of the game plan for Washington whatsoever. If you look at our projections for him this week, we also are assuming something similar where he's not going to be all that involved. We have McKissick projected for just 0.82 rush attempts this game, which gives him a projection then about 3.5 rushing yards. And that number that we have on him over in No House Advantage is 19.5 rushing yards. There's no receiving, there's no reception props. Given how limited he played last week, and that I do think the Giants defense should look better this week than it did last week, I think under 19.5 on J.D. McKissick for rushing yards is actually one of the better plays on the board, especially if he's going to keep up that same kind of usage he had last week. He had one carry. He touched the ball once the entire game.
No, you're right. And again, Washington being up, which I think is a safer play. Do you like Washington to win this game? I guess we should start there. I like them to win and cover. No, you don't?
No, the line's different now, but I do a bet on the Giants plus 4.5 for this game, mostly because I think that and once again, it's moved since then, but I don't think there was enough accounting for that Ryan Fitzpatrick was not likely to play this week. So the line moved after he got ruled out, but I thought we should have already known that he wasn't going to play this week. And I think that I don't think Fitzpatrick is a fantastic quarterback, but I think he's serviceable, and I think he's much better than Heineke. And I think that him being out has a pretty significant impact on Washington's offense. I also think that in general, it's going to slow the pace down of this game on both sides. So that's another reason also to kind of like the Giants with the points here, is just because if this is going to be a lower scoring game, there's a better chance that it stays competitive. And even if Washington wins, I think that 4.5, the opening line was a little bit too wide. But I slightly favor the Giants to win this game. And also, let me go to, we have on Awesemo.com now, we do have projections for game model. And I think we have the fair line as Washington 2.5. And
that's post Fitzpatrick getting ruled out.
Yes.
which makes sense. And look, I mean, you get them in there at 4.5, then I don't care if you love Washington, you still kind of have to jump on that bout. That's insane and smart on you to get in there ahead of time. So let me push this back. All right, let's play this out where the Giants hang, the Giants win, or maybe you just need those points. But either way, this is a cover, maybe even an outright victory. Low scoring game. How do you approach somebody like Terry McLaurin, who has a 5.5 reception prop, 75.5 receiving yards? And again, you mentioned Fitzpatrick, where it doesn't need to be an offense that just pushes the ball 20 plus yards down the field in order to get both of these guys involved on the same page. I think that's the guy who gets hurt the most with the change of quarterback. How do you approach those two props with Terry?
Yeah, it's actually very close to the projection we have on the site for him. We have him for 5.4 catches, 69.4 receiving yards. So pretty in line with the numbers there. But once again, I'm not massively high on Taylor Heinicke. He had some stretches where looked okay down the stretch of last year, but I don't know that he's going to be able to throw the ball downfield. They've really struggled to get McLaurin involved in the offense in week 1. And that was in, kind of a similar situation where Heinicke was a quarterback. So I'd be inclined to go under 75.5 receiving yards. I worry a little bit that if they're just going to be playing really conservative and kind of a game management type strategy with Heinicke, there might be a lot of shorter passes thrown to Terry McLaurin, or they might be just trying to get him more involved after he wasn't involved last week. So the 5.5 receptions, which by the way, also it's very much in line with what our projection is on the site. I just consider that to be a fair number. 75.5 receiving yards, I shade towards the under on that one.
Yeah, the receiving yards, I feel like is much easier to manage because you're right. The receptions could come with that. So let's look at this. And again, use our promo code as we see some people popping in here, Awesemo, and we'll match your first deposit up to $25. That's huge. And you can do some damage there with your 25 and our 25, and then just hit us up with a like. It's not much that we ask in return. But I like that theory and kind of how the ball is moving so far, and especially with receptions even being possible to go over that number for McLaurin. So Logan Thomas is the guy that I really think, for a reception standpoint, going over that would be one of the safest, if not the safest, plays you can make with a prop and a Washington skill player. Are you looking at all at Logan Thomas? Now, the receiving yards, 45.5, that gets tricky. But being peppered with targets in this game specifically, with that matchup against the Giants, who aren't great against the tight end, I would lean heavily towards over 4.5 receptions for Thomas.
I mean, our projection, we have him projected for 4.4 receptions in this game. We have him with a 19% target share. It's a very fair number according to our projection. It's not one that I would lean massively on either side of. Also, and we saw Logan Thomas play a decent amount with Heinicke last year, and there were some games that we saw Heinicke lock onto him. I'm going to pull up some of the exact numbers for that. It would be cool if do you ever just like try to Google stuff and then the computer's like, hey, your connection is not private. Like, what does that mean? I'm at home in my office. What is it not private?
Oh, it happens a lot.
I can't see how many passing yards Tyler Heinicke had to Logan Thomas in games they played together last year for no particular reason, whatever. Like, who's trying to steal this information from me? But so
person upstairs fixing the bat.
Yeah, it could be. It's almost definitely. It could be the bat himself also.
That's fair. That definitely could be. I just think that this week I would look at the matchup. The Giants defense is atrocious for the most part against it. It's just difficult to cover the tight end. But yes, I mean, our projections are right there. It's a pretty sharp number as is. So I can't rely on the data there to put me over the top. Is there anybody else that we've missed or that you truly like that you can hit us up with on our way out, Greg?
I'm just trying to bring up the targets for Logan Thomas in the regular season game that Taylor Heinicke started. Logan Thomas was targeted 9 times in that game. He had 5 catches for 74 yards. I don't really feel great going to Logan Thomas number. It's just so close to the projections we have for him. To me, that's just going to be a stay away on both sides. But now that I have that information, what was the follow-up question? Sorry.
No, just anybody else on the way out. We got to get out. So I'm just curious if.
No, I think we hit on pretty much everybody. I will point out that Sterling Shepard, 4.5 receptions is prop over on Advantage. At least last week, he was the guy that we really saw Daniel Jones seem to be the most comfortable with, was the guy he targeted most heavily in the passing game. So if I'm looking for one of the Giants receivers, we talked about some of the uncertainty with Darius Slayton, some of the uncertainty with Kenny Golladay. The one I feel best about is that Sterling Shepard over 4.5 receptions. It does seem like that rapport that he had with Daniel Jones, at least having played with him before, is going to matter a little bit at the start of the season.
At G. Ehrenberg DFS for Greg on Twitter, at Shander Show for me. Thanks to Tyler. Thanks to you out there. And thank you to No House Advantage. Use our promo code Awesemo and we'll match your first deposit up to $25. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out. And coming up right now, don't go anywhere, as we have our MLB Deeper Dive with Eric and Adam right now on the channel. For Greg, for Tyler, for everybody at Awesemo, No House Advantage, have a great night and good luck.